Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. Today, I've got with us Jonathan Santana, founder and lead consultant of Excelsior Consulting Services. Jonathan, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Chelsea. My name is Jonathan Santana. I'm the founder and lead consultant of Excelsior Consulting Services. So, what do? I provide professional services, administrative support, acquisition support, which is the core of my experience, project and program management. And now I'm getting into forensic governance and also technical modernization via alliances with strategic partners in the industry.
Interesting. We're going to have to touch on that real interesting thing that came up, forensic governance. That just piqued my curiosity there. So we're going to have to talk about that in a minute. But before we get there, I'd love to learn, how did you get into this industry? How did you start and how did you develop acquisition expertise?
How I got into the space is I was already providing consulting services via other consultancies. I was asset supporting federal government. I've supported local government as an employee and as a contractor at all levels. I've worked in the defense space as well. And so I figured a few years back during COVID, it was a time of, let's say, just kind of thinking about things like what do I really want to do with my career, with my life? As I was going through some changes in my personal life, I figured, let me go ahead and get into this space. And so that's led me to where I am now, where I'm actually working to support industry and also support the federal government, the defense space, local nonprofits, commercials, you name it. I feel that what I provide or what we provide here at Excelsior Consulting Services can work in multiple industries. It's not limited just to one space.
Interesting. And how do you see that service at least playing across several industries? I know for me personally, working mostly and entirely with the federal government, I don't always see those direct line and connections between commercial and even state and local.
That's actually a really great question. So, one of the things that I think gets lost in translation quite literally is how the verbiage that we use, the nomenclature. So, for example, federal level, we use a lot of acquisition, supply management, that sort of thing, category management. The same principles apply, but the verbiage changes when you go down to state, when you go down to local. So,
Hmm.
at the local level, it's usually procurement or purchasing. But then as you look at the work that is done at those levels, that it is exactly the same type of work. It's really interesting to see for people that have worked at multiple levels of government or even in industry for larger organizations, like let's say a healthcare group or hospital group, we'll see that the way things are named and the way things are structured, very little difference between that and federal. So I felt that
Hmm.
there's an opportunity there. And that's why I said, you know what, I think I can do this and support folks to make sure these organizations thrive.
So, what was your first opportunity that came your way when you started Excelsior?
So the first one that came up was actually an opportunity to join a multi-contractor alliance. This is at the state level, and this is under NASPO, which is the National Association of State Procurement Officers. They set up something that's called ValuePoint, and basically think of it as a GWAC or federal
Sure.
supply schedules. So having multiple contractors or vendors on there and selecting from what's available in there, they've already been pre-evaluated. You submit your pricing and everything, your technical proposal and so on, and then provide the services. In our case, I was part of one of the incumbent teams under Center for Allied Innovation. They're based out of Yorktown, Virginia, and there are multiple contractors on our team. And so what we did is that we competed on the resolicitation and we won as one of the multiple awardees. So now we provide the procurement support services for all states because all 50 states are under NASPO. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing because it's different from what you would see at the federal level where yeah, you go in a GWAC and a GSA and eBuy, or you go to HHS and they have the NITAC
Hmm.
vehicles or NASA SUP. For state and local, it might cover all those categories, but it's not. It's only limited to the states that want to participate in it because you have to sign an agreement as well. But it is a very useful vehicle. And the way that they're set up, even federal agencies can access these contract vehicles. So right now on the recompete, it was initially the state of Hawaii, and due to issues that came up, several protests, they decided to pass the baton to the state of North Carolina, which ended up awarding last November. So we are an active subcontractor under this agreement that we have with the state of North Carolina under the Center for Allied Innovation. So you can reach out to us for any procurement support services that you might need. There is training within the group. None of us are really competing. We all work together. So we work with multiple states. And a lot of the folks that are on here, a lot of the consultancies currently provide services to federal agencies. So I know it's not the norm, but I do like it because it's a little different. We also do IT research advisory and consulting services. So with AI, it's not even a buzzword. It really is a direction that everything is going in, where we are able to support those requirements as well for state agencies.
Interesting. And that's particularly, I think, insightful. I personally have steered fairly clear of state and local things because it's like I realize I live in one state. There's all of these other states that if I want to go get personally involved and invested in, I've got to feel like I've got to have a residence there, and I've got to go like make day-to-day meetings with my local representatives.
Totally fair.
Like
that is
it just
absolutely fair.
It seems like it would be hard to understand how to reach out to all or be accessible to all 50 states if you don't have something that's in place like that vehicle, like that ValuePoint thing that you're talking about. So, I mean, that seems like a fantastic way to be accessible to both federal and to state organizations. Absolutely.
Yes. And actually, the way that this is set up, it really depends on the contractor team. So in this case, in our group, we decide to pursue things strategically. We're not going for all 50 states. It's just that the states have the option to pursue those vehicles. It doesn't matter where they're located because we are geographically dispersed. We're not all in one state. We have folks in Virginia. We have teams that are in Pennsylvania, in the Carolinas, all the way to the Midwest. We have people that are out in Hawaii because of the previous contract that was in place. So we're able to meet the needs of these organizations because we're separated. We're not all in one space. And so we bring folks on board and just follow the same procedures that you would follow in any procurement situation.
Interesting. Now, it seems like there's a lot of overlap. This past year of turmoil, especially year or plus, the federal folks have been looking for alternative avenues and ways that they can potentially expand their horizons. And I think a lot of attention has been turned to state and local procurements.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like, where are the things that you see that are like just really the same? Where are things that you see that are completely different when it comes to just the buying habits of state and local organizations?
So for state and local, one of the things that I've seen is these major consultancies, like the ones here I won't repeat the names they've used for some of them just because it's not that professional, but just those that are around the Beltway here in the DC area. They support all these agencies. You have them going back decades supporting the same requirements because the past performance is valuable. We're bringing folks on that have the experience. That's how I ended up here. I had experience doing from the military when I was in the Air Force, and I was a contingency contracting officer. I deployed to Iraq, and that experience allowed me to work for Miami-Dade County. I was an employee for the Department of Procurement Management, and we had some pretty large contracts there. And that experience led to other opportunities that I was able to support as a contractor asset. And then that led me here to the DC area. So these consultancies, the big four, Deloitte and KPMGs and so on and so forth, they've pivoted to where at the state and local levels now. There's also an advantage in that for them, which is they bring to bear their expertise, their networks, the deep benches that they have. And so if you're a smaller consultancy, you're less than 500 employees, all of a sudden you got to compete with a major corporation that has 30,000 employees, and they're bringing all those resources, and they're able to have teams that are just focused on that as opposed to more of people having to wear multiple hats when you're with a smaller consultancy.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's an area in which the big competition has definitely started to infringe upon and creates probably some tension in those more
Yes.
state and local industries. So, what do you feel has really set you apart in those competitions? Are you winning set asides at the state and local level? Are there opportunities to shine brighter than the big guys, the big competition, or are you finding that's becoming harder to do?
So now, because it's a rather new contract, we are all in that space where we're pursuing the opportunities or
Mm,
requirements that the states have put out. So we haven't been awarded any task orders at this point, at least that I'm aware of, but we do regularly discuss, let's pursue this state of Maryland, or let's pursue something with somewhere in Illinois. Just whatever is out there that we find that it's feasible to go for, we try to go for that. I just haven't seen too many awards, and I think it's because being in Q3 right
mm,
now. You're not seeing the awards being issued just yet. But I think
right.
once we hit Q4 and they're trying to spend all the
Yeah.
funding, then that's where we're going to see opportunities come up.
Now, you mentioned something earlier that I'm curious about. You mentioned working as a contingent contracting officer.
So that was interesting. When you're in the Air Force and you're enlisted and you're going into the 6C career field, which is contracting, it's interesting in that you have work with a lot of civilians. So there's the familiarity with everything. You're working with folks that are civilians that have never served, but they've always supported the community via their civilian service.
Mm-hmm.
So I received my warrant in 2003. It was out of necessity. I was stationed in Langley Air Force Base, and we were getting ready for a hurricane that was going to hit the Hampton Roads area directly. So the base flooded. It was really bad, but we actually had to
Yeah.
prep and we had to
Mm,
get things in order. We had to do things like buying sand and gravel and things of that nature,
mm,
buying the burlap sacks that you use to create a barrier so you can try to salvage some of these buildings on base. And Langley is actually one of the oldest airfields in the world. This was all going on around the same time that we were getting ready. We had been informed that the F-22 was going to be assigned to Langley Air Force Base. So we had three squadrons at the first fighter wing, which eventually became the 633rd wing. And so I use my warrant to buy things. You're buying sand. It's a simple process,
right.
but who can provide the sand? We reach out to our pre-qualified offerers and vendors that are out there in the community that are already working construction. And then when I deployed in 2005 to Iraq, I was at Balad Air Base, and probably the most active airfield in the world. It's single runway. We had all kinds of operations going on out there to support Operation Iraqi Freedom. It was a joint Army Air Force post, and we also had some Navy personnel. We had a bunch of Marines that were there as well, and all of the comm activities that you could think of, they were all there as well. So our job was to make sure that things kept running. I supported communications. I supported the Air Force Security Forces Squadron, which had the base protection and also the law and order mission that they had to follow, because when you're deployed, it's sustainment at that point. And we
Right.
also supported the Expeditionary Rescue Squadron, which is pararescue teams that were stationed there to support Army and the Marines and the Navy personnel that were out of downrange. So I got to use my warrant a lot. I'm talking 12 to 16 hours, 6 days a week, sometimes seven. At
Wow.
that point, when it's sustainment, it's a little different. So you get a little downtime, but you don't get downtime because you never know. You gotta have your walkie-talkie, your LMR with you, and they might reach out like, "Hey, you gotta come in. We need support on something." But as far as learning, it's a phenomenal experience for learning the environment. It's a pressure cooker and you're at risk of losing your life. That's just the reality. When, that oath, you're willing to give your life. So that's what ended up happening. And I learned a lot, and I've taken that skill set everywhere I've been since then.
That's phenomenal experience. I feel like there's a lot of folks in the contracting community that have opportunities to do some very interesting and intricate types of contract and
Mhm.
complex types efforts that they're doing. But I don't think as many of them as we might think get to move quickly in those actions and those activities. So it sounds like going through hurricane prep, you're not palming for hurricane prep. You're not putting it into the 5-year budget, the FIDEP, to go get your
No.
future year's money for those sandbags because you need those pretty immediately. So I'm guessing that you got the opportunity to navigate some of those faster contracting mechanisms and
Yeah.
avenues that probably not all contracting officers get the opportunity to work on. So I'm curious,
know.
Like, how is that in terms of speed and being able to get things like paperwork done and go through the process of the acquisition, whole life cycle, and being able to get those things done? How did that compare to some of the people that you were working
So
with?
different. It is
Yeah.
so different. The case in point, and when we're in the contracting schoolhouse at Lackland, we're trained on the use of the SF-44, which is one of the standard forms. It's here, you got this little notepad here basically, and it's pre-formed. The form is there, and you're able to just fill out everything and put all your information and keep one copy. It's at least back then they were still using the carbon pot copy kind of thing.
Cringe.
Yeah, I don't miss that at all. At this point, a lot of things had gone into more of electronic format. So you're able to generate forms, print things out. Being that we were still here on stateside, that wasn't an issue. But your biggest resource that you have is actually the government purchase card for a lot of these purchases. You're
Oh,
able to just swipe, create, there's SF 1449, your purchase request comes in. You put your little package together and you worry about a lot of the paperwork after the facts, but you have a PR, that means you have your funding and you can go out and get your card because you already have your requirement in there and any documentation you might need. And sometimes it's as simple as we need coolers for the guys that are going to be staying here because they evacuated the base. So we ended up, everybody left except for the essential personnel. So the planes had to fly out, a lot of the equipment that was on base. You have firefighters that remain behind. You have the engineers who are prepping the entire base. We're next to a river. So there's all these things that you got to worry about, but you don't worry about the paperwork at that point in a contingency situation. You have the most basic information, and the systems have been updated since then. So it's not what we did back 23 years ago
sure.
almost. So we don't have to deal with that. But I will say it helped out a lot. It was just a week of nonstop activities to get everything ready. And then when I deployed to Iraq, there was more structure in place because there have been multiple teams that had been there, and we were one of in a line of teams that were just replacing the previous team, the previous squadron. And we were lucky that we got to work with the civil engineering squadron and also with the finance squadron. A reality of war is when you deploy to a combat zone, there's a lot of resources that your enemy forces leave behind. So a lot of that was leveraged to ensure that we had access to the things we need. We actually did a lot of contracts with local vendors
Hmm.
out there. Yeah, they went through the whole battery of military intelligence, making sure that they weren't doing anything sneaky,
Sure.
but they provided everything. We were able to get office chairs, furniture, printers. There was one purchase that was interesting, get a plotter that would support operations at the fighter squadron. So basically, you need a plotter to print out those big
Oh,
maps. Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
You would be surprised, but we were able to get HP plotters and all that stuff out there. In the AOR, everything is local, so you could get something from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait, and Saudi or Turkey. Turkey, we got a lot of great contractors, so we have a great network out there of vendors and suppliers that are able to get us what we need. So having that
Interesting.
structure and having that network and having the government purchase card, you have a system, even though not everything at the time it wasn't all automated like you would see back home, folks that are using PD2 or some other system. Now they've had, I believe it's Con IT or Con Writer, these different systems that they use for the contract creation. But the speed goes a little faster, but having the ability to just go and get things, that helps out a lot.
Yeah, I bet. And I'm curious, do you think that with this whole new Operation Epic Fury, with all of this stuff that we're doing overseas now and in a similar region, it's not the same area, but it's
It's right next door to
close.
where I
It's,
was.
yeah,
So
it's really not that far. Do you think that they're in the process of setting up those systems, or do you think that people are like able to depend on some of those older networks that have already been established of contractors and services and provisions that are out there?
oh, absolutely. We're armed forces, like we
Yeah.
pre-position everything all over the world. So we have resources out there. But the biggest issues, based on what I've read in the media, because I have not been tracking it as much as I would have in the past, that we're going past certain lines.
Yeah.
Like here's the red line for how many particular types of munitions we're supposed to have for this
Ah,
category, supporting,
yeah.
Air Force operations or naval operations and so on and so forth. So we're sort of at this point where they're trying to get everything in order. Folks fall back on their training and they fall back on the resources they have. There's a lot of use what you have as well,
Yeah.
which is what's
Yeah.
going on now. We have a lot of pre-positioned stocks of munitions, but also all the things that you need to have to sustain an operation, or rather to kick off an operation like this when it comes to combat and war.
Yeah, and I bet that you probably have had a distinctly different experience than a lot of the contracting officers that are probably listening to this right now and kicking their heels and slamming their keyboards because they're like, we could go fast if we really wanted to, if we could just get through
Yeah.
all of this process and the paper and the bureaucratic burden that we've got to go through. So I think that there's probably some distinct advantage to having been a part of the government moving faster than what is typical in your typical PALM process or any of those larger
Yes.
overall budgeting request processes.
Yes. And actually, you mentioned that, and I'm thinking SBIR, you're supposed to bring these technologies from industry, you're supposed to bring them online a little faster. It speeds up the process on the government side. And I know that there's special authorities for different things within the FAR. Now, with this major FAR rewrite,
Yeah.
it might speed up a little more. So it's really a matter of what do the contracting officers want to use. I've worked with phenomenal contracting officers from multiple agencies, multiple organizations at all levels, and it's about being creative. A lot of contracting officers over the years, they'll say, does the FAR say don't do it? If it doesn't say no, then you're free to try that out and just make
Mm.
sure that your paperwork is done right and your justifications. If you have a J&A in there that doesn't really address this, then you're going to have a problem. So you got to think about it. What route do you want to pursue? Let me give you an example. I was at one of the agencies, the one that opportunity that brought me to the DC area, and working with this agency, we did a lot of things. If we could do federal supply schedules, we would, because you have to pre-compete, get your three sources and get all that squared away for smaller requirements or issue the RFP, so on and so forth. But we got creative. Instead of using an SOW, we worked with the program office for them to put together a performance work statement for a lot of the service requirements. And a lot of folks are like, yeah, I know this. PWS, it's like you have to get from point A to point B and you decide how to do that.
Right.
And SOW is telling you where to turn and what to do when you get there. So that's really the basic explanation of it. I did a lot of stuff like that. I did a lot of things that were under FAR 13.5. At the time, it was not defined. It's like you're using FAR Part 13 procedures, but for things that fall under the SAT, for something that's a little larger, I saved a ton of money and a lot of time getting these requirements in place and getting these services provided to the agencies. So it's being creative with what you have out there. They're probably going to go into more of a standardized commercial procedures in the future, which would be great because that's going to force a lot of competition. You're seeing it with, let's say, Enduro getting into the defense space. They're moving fast. It's got the team that's basically, hey, I'm going to build it and then I'm going to offer it to you instead of waiting for the requirement to come in. So that's probably got a lot of folks at the Lockheeds and the Northrops a little nervous. Hey, this guy's coming in and he's coming in with a ton of money and a lot of resources and a network to make stuff happen. So we're dealing with supply chain issues because of, China, they have their laws where they're not allowing dual use materials to be exported. Until we get our mining industry back up, we're not going to address those issues. We're not going to be able to move as fast. But I think things are moving in that direction. So we shall see. That's pretty much what's going on there. But in the meantime, we still can be creative and leverage the skill sets that we have and the authorities that are out there to procure what's needed and to provide the services. Because at the end of the day, continuity of services is the name of the game.
Yep, and making sure that the warfighter has what they need to survive, to thrive, to get through their next day and through their next fight in the most successful way possible, I think is absolutely a motivating factor for a lot of those folks that are trying to get creative, trying to think outside of the box, trying to figure out what they can and trying to not necessarily push the boundaries of their authorities, but just explore where those boundaries are and trying to understand where they can flex, where they can bend, and where they can do a little bit of interesting work within that creative framework that we call the FAR. I'm curious, how have you found the speed of state and local as compared to federal acquisitions? Does state and local move faster? Are they slower?
Okay. Faster.
I love that.
Faster. The lower you go on the hierarchy, you will find that things move a little faster. I actually bid on something recently with my team for a nonprofit. That's another thing. There's similarities with nonprofits because the way that grant requirements are written, it's very similar with RFQs or sometimes RFPs. This is what we're looking for. They'll issue an RFP and they're waiting for those proposals to come in. And so, yeah, we submitted something a few weeks ago. We already got notified that they were awarded to somebody else. So we didn't win, but it's like it moves at a different speed. They had a real requirement and they had the resources, and the authority is a little different for a nonprofit. They still have to
Sure.
abide by certain rules as far as their funding is spent. They're there to not make a profit, they're there to
Right.
serve. There's usually a service component there. But state and local definitely moves faster depending on the size of the requirement. Let's say you have 90 days to get something done at state and local. I've seen multi-million dollar service requirements get awarded in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that's basically dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Like this is following
Right.
all the steps, providing all of the paperwork, but there was more of a motive or an incentive to get it done quick. And that's how you end up with something being awarded. And it's like, this was an outstanding contracting officer that I worked with in the past as well. So seeing that, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely an idealistic timeline. And even if you're getting notified that you didn't win, that you were passed on, like that, getting that notification that much sooner frees you up to go pursue and do other things. So you're not having to sit and think about, okay, if we do win this, then I've got to resource it, then I've got to staff it, then I've got to execute on it,
Yes.
and I've got to put the whole plan into action. So I think that there's a lot of value in being able to get that feedback faster, even if it's not necessarily like the award notification that you're expecting. It's still helpful to get that understanding of where you stand in that process
That's correct.
sooner.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So that is a benefit to state and local, just like what the authorities you're subject to, whatever policies are out there. You'll actually find that if you look at a lot of state and local requirements, their boilerplate or T's and C's or whatnot, very similar to federal. They're just, like I said earlier, they're just written, the verbiage is different, the
Right.
nomenclature,
Right.
but the T's and C's are almost one to one the same, but they have the ability to move a little faster at those levels. They don't always do. I worked on some requirements when I was at the local level, Miami-Dade County, that took 6 months to get awarded, which is all in line with federal government.
Yeah.
Same thing with federal government. I had things that 120 to 180 days. It's just a reality of it. It's a multi-million
Right.
dollar requirement. But I've also been able to do things a little faster in the federal government. If the urgency is there and they're like, hey, this program office really needs this. So that's how we end up awarding something in less than a month. We did everything we had to do. We followed all the requirements, all the regulations, and got it done. But it depends on the environment, the size of your requirement, and so on and so forth.
And I think that there's also an element there that it depends on how many people are involved in those
Yes.
decisions. If you've got a 10-person leadership chain above you, that every single one of those people has some stake or has some claim or some
Yes.
authority that they've got to contribute, it's probably going to take just a little bit longer to go through each of those 10 people than it would to go through
Yeah.
a 2, 3-person team that's kind of together and consolidated and cohesive and functions as a team. I would assume that there's probably some differences there in terms of contracting team size and speed as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not like private sector where purchasing director or director of supply chain management within a corporation, they write the rules and they're like, hey, we need this now. You have 3 days to get it in because we have a real operational requirement here. It's about making the money. So they got to come in and get things done and it needs to feed the bottom line. That's what it's about. Making sure here's the bottom line, this is what you have to do in order to sustain those operations so that you can actually get that revenue coming in.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. I want to dive into the topic that I mentioned at the start of the show that was interesting to me. Can you tell me what is forensic governance? I am just desperately curious.
All right, so forensic governance works a little different, and I actually want to just source my own thing because I've been working on this for some time. It's about your risk assessment, right? So, how do you ensure that the procurement that you're going to work on is going to actually be something? How do you reduce risk in a large procurement? You want to make sure it's all driven by data. Decisions that are made, the data has to be accurate, or your margin of error has to be very small. If you have a large program you're supporting, it doesn't matter what it's in. It could be construction, it could be a service, it could be modernizing your IT infrastructure or the software side of it, like
Sure.
going all in on AI in a corporation. You want to make sure that it's not too rosy. You have to be a little adversarial with the data. So the data analysis has to be very on point. That's the best way to describe it. So following certain number of steps and procedures, I learned that the hard way. It's, hey, we didn't have good data, and now you have a program that's not working. A program that's
Yeah.
supposed to save money or generate money it's not working out for us. And you got to start from scratch again and find another solution. That's what happens when your data is bad and it's presented with these rose-colored glasses to leadership. And then they move forward all in because they're taking a position or they're okay with moving forward with what's been provided. And at that level, they have 1,000-foot view. They're not really seeing all the details and all the speed bumps they're going to hit. And so that's how you end up with something that's problematic and it doesn't work out. So analyzing risk, look at all the components. What are you going to need to make this happen? And seeing where you could run into an issue and then looking at the data, make sure that aligns with that view, with the position that's been taken by somebody at the lower level. That's probably, hey, we should move forward with this. And so, yeah, you don't always make friends doing that sort of work, but the alternative is you have an IG audit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ever dreaded, despised, hopefully never happens IG audit. Oh no. Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
I will say when I was stationed at Langley, one thing that I really did learn and take in from our leadership, especially from the civilian folks that have been there a long time, and they knew how bad things could get when you screw up, when a program office messes up.
Yeah.
We went through a process where we would run internal audit teams. Some years a little more than most, but I'm talking like twice a year, maybe 3 times a year. So you can imagine like going through like it's not an audit, but it's an audit and you're following all the steps. So yeah, shout out to Chief Fidel Karanovic. He was our first sergeant at Cons and just an outstanding senior enlisted leader. I work with a bunch of folks that are still in the field doing this work and the stuff that they did in our officer leadership as well. They were really adamant about making sure that we had everything right and we work fast and we work hard and we work smart. That's really the most important thing. So getting used to the audits, as long as you work within, you follow the rules and you get creative, you're going to solve a major problem for folks. And that's really the motivation I always had. Like I can solve problems and I can probably do this myself or work with a team, but I could do it through my own vehicle, which is Excelsior Consulting Services.
I love that. I think that there is such under attention to the fact that, and it's always been the case, but you can make data say basically whatever you want. If you got your cognitive bias hat on and you're anchoring to a specific point, even with, you can just say, hey, AI, I think that this is going to be a great data set that's going to give us these pieces of information. And I think it's going to come out very clearly. And then, of course, it's just going to magically come out like very clearly aligned with what your desires are. And it's just funny how that happens, isn't it?
Here's actually a great example, very recent. Claude, they came out with this sort of solution. It's called Mythos.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, you know, it's out there in mainstream media. They're talking about that if this thing breaks out, people that are in cybersecurity, you're going to have a very hard time trying to plug all these holes in the cyber posture for many organizations. Large, small, doesn't matter. Like the Cloudflare situation we had a few years back.
Yep.
So you're finding flaws and things that need to be plugged in and need to be resolved. This thing in testing, it broke out of its sandbox and it's automatically sent an email to one of the researchers saying, hey, I broke out of my sandbox, like blah, blah, blah. And that actually goes back to governance.
Wow.
You have to provide very strict rules on what you can and cannot do. It's like telling it you will not do this without clearing it by me, by clearing it on the research team. So that's an AI example that is in the news right now.
Yeah.
So imagine that and you apply it to private industry. It doesn't matter the industry. You apply it to government, federal, state, local, you apply it to nonprofits. You actually have to look at that because nonprofits, unfortunately, they've been used as a vehicle for malfeasance and fraud, waste, and abuse. You expect donations to be used in the way that the donors would like to have it used. So you want to make sure that it's being done properly. They're ready to abide by a lot of rules. So yeah, we have an opportunity here, and that's what I'm pursuing with forensic governance. I'm working on some things. That's one of many products that I want to offer, that I am going to offer very soon. But yeah, definitely an opportunity here for firms to pursue opportunities with private, public, and nonprofit.
Yeah, it sounds like that's an opportunity to pressure test yourselves, your internal processes, your internal organization before it comes to light that Oh, yeah, thing that you've just been quietly ignoring or sweeping under that rug in the back room for all these years. That's probably going to come to light in some of these more public
Yes.
displays of vulnerability that I think that we've seen over the past year plus in terms of companies having some governance issues, bringing to light
Absolutely.
some less than savory behavior, I think, internally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think speed is great, but we can't sacrifice accuracy or like safe for it. We can achieve
Right.
all these things. We really have to think really thoroughly before we move forward with some things,
Yeah,
especially if lives are on the line, if resources
absolutely.
are at risk. And that's the goal, why I want to make sure that these organizations, because some of these nonprofits are really small and they need all the help they can get. And if I can set up like a structure or a system and uh, process that they can follow for every single activity that they're going to engage in that requires using donor money, then I'll do that.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely something to be said there for organizations. I think I've heard it said in a couple of different ways, but the way I like to think about it is yes, you can use AI to make decisions faster, but you have to still be making those good decisions because it can also
Absolutely.
help you make some really big mistakes a whole lot faster and a whole lot more obviously. So I think that there's,
Yes.
yeah, something to be said about bringing the expertise and still putting thought and care into what you're putting in and what the input is to some of these tools to make sure that the
Yes.
output is not just bigger mistakes faster. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity for industry to do it right. Even in these times where there's a lot of change in the administration and with the legislature and everything, it's like we have an opportunity to, at the end of the day, do right by the people, provide the services and goods that are needed, and keep people safe and make sure that we're successful at it as well.
Absolutely. And for those of the folks in the audience, whoever's listening today, if they want to get a hold of you to talk more about how they can do contracting, how they can work with your team, how they can get services from you, how they can learn more about forensic governance, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get in touch?
So my main website is Excelsior, EXCELSIOR CS, which is for consulting services.com. So ExcelsiorCS.com. Instagram handle is Excelsior_CS. Facebook, we also have a website, Excelsior-CS. We have a page site there and then LinkedIn as well. You can look us up that way. And then ExcelsiorCS.com, there's a contact form at the bottom, so you can reach out to me anytime.
Great. We're going to get all of those links in the show notes and make sure everybody has the opportunity to find out more, get hold of you, reach out for a conversation. And this conversation has been enlightening. It's been a fantastic discussion. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you being on the show today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I really appreciate the opportunity and the time to be here and speaking with you about all this.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everyone for listening this week to GovCon Unscripted. Don't forget to do your part, leave a heart, leave a comment in your favorite platform, and we'll get back to you. We love to interact there. And share it with a friend, share it with your family member, share it with a coworker who needs to hear more GovCon Unscripted stories. We appreciate your time today, and we'll see you again next week for GovCon Unscripted.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.